Hello, and thank you for joining me for this guided tour of the city of Cambridge. We are starting our tour here at Cambridge Castle. Well, at the site of Cambridge Castle, because unfortunately the last parts of the castle itself were dismantled in 1842. But we are standing on something which is quite unusual for this part of England. It's a hill. We are only 21 metres above sea level. However, this area of England is so flat that this little hill attracted the Romans in around 40 AD. They built a castle and a small town. Cambridge's city centre today is now half a mile further east, and on this site of the original Roman settlement is now Cambridge's Shire Hall, the administrative centre of the whole county. As we make our way down Castle Hill towards the present-day city centre of Cambridge, we come to another important feature that attracted the Romans to this area. The Romans found that this was an ideal place to cross the River Cam. The bridge in Cambridge is this one, the Great Bridge, also known as Magdalen Bridge. The Romans probably built a bridge on or near this site. However, this present-day iron bridge was built in 1823. Medieval Cambridge was a busy port. Seafaring vessels were able to sail this far inland, but no further. So naturally, Cambridge became an important market town. This area by Magdalen Bridge was where the boats would dock, and it is still known as quayside. It was not until the arrival of the railways in 1845 that commercial river trade started to decline. Now the river is only used for pleasure, as we will be seeing a little later. Our tour now takes us along Bridge Street with its splendid Georgian and Tudor buildings towards Cambridge's most unusual church. This is the Round Church. It is only one of 5 round churches in England, and it is Cambridge's second oldest building. It was built in the year 1130 at a time of the return of the First Crusaders. The Crusaders had seen the original round church in Jerusalem. They were so inspired that they built this copy. But the round church is not Cambridge's oldest building. In Bennett Street, there's a tower that is not only older, but is in fact the oldest surviving structure in the whole county of Cambridgeshire. We're at the Church of St Benet's, or St Benedict's as it's also known. Although parts of the church have been rebuilt over the centuries, the tower has been dated to the reign of King Canute, around the year 1025, which makes this tower nearly 1,000 years old. The long and short cornerstones on the tower are a typical Saxon building technique. There is also something quite interesting at the top of the tower, the round holes above the belfry windows. Waste management was virtually non-existent in medieval England, and there was a great problem with vermin. People believed that these round holes were for nesting owls. Owls were very much encouraged in medieval times because they eat mice. St Benet's is not just famous because of its age. Something started here back in the 17th century that is now practiced in churches all over the world. In fact, it's going on right now inside. So let's go and have a look. People have been ringing bells for thousands of years. But it was in the 1650s that a local man called Fabian Stedman started the art of change ringing, which we can see here. Stedman, who later became the parish clerk, invented the mechanism to swing bells in a controlled way. Change ringing soon became popular all over England, but participation was a mark of top social status, and women were excluded. Thankfully today, that has changed, and you can come and see both male and female bell ringers each Sunday. Leaving St Benet's churchyard, you'll see that we have to climb up steps to get back to street level. Nothing particularly interesting about that, you may say. Well, you would be wrong. Since the Middle Ages, people have been throwing their waste into the street, which has resulted in the street level being raised 2 feet higher than it once was. Opposite St Benet's is the Eagle Public House. There are around 120 public houses, or pubs, in Cambridge. That means there's one pub for every 1,000 inhabitants. Most pubs date back many hundreds of years, and they all have their own special character. The Eagle is no exception. It was established in 1525 as a coaching inn by Corpus Christi College. Its coaching inn origins are still visible today. There is this elegant coach gateway which leads through to the courtyard, and there are old coach numbers still painted on the walls. The Eagle is popular with academics from the university, particularly those from the world-famous Cavendish Laboratories, which is close by. Francis Crick and James Watson, who discovered the structure of DNA, used to frequent this pub, and it was in the Eagle on the 28th of February 1953 that Crick and Watson announced to the world that they had found the secret of life. The Eagle is also famous for the graffiti on the ceiling inside. Let's go and have a look. During the Second World War, the Eagle was popular with American and British servicemen. They used candles, cigarette lighters and lipstick to write their squadron names and numbers on the ceiling of the pub. The crew of the famous Memphis Belle even drew their emblem on the ceiling. Not long after the war, the graffiti was plastered over, and it wasn't until the 1990s that the graffiti was rediscovered and preserved. Cambridge has many charming side streets, like this one, Little St Mary's Lane. It has quaint cottages from the 16th, 17th and 18th century. And it is just here where the University of Cambridge first began. We are in Little St Mary's Churchyard. It is on this site that the University of Cambridge was first started nearly 800 years ago, when in 1209 a group of students fled Oxford after a series of riots, ended violently in the deaths of several of their fellow academics. When the students first arrived in Cambridge, they lodged in St. Peter's Church, which stood on these grounds. The students quickly established themselves, and soon it was obvious that this new academic community in Cambridge required their own buildings. In 1284, Hugh de Boursham, who was the Bishop of Ely, founded Peterhouse next door, the first of the 31 colleges of Cambridge University. Shortly after their departure, the Church of St. Peter's collapsed, and in 1352, Little St. Mary's was built in its place. Inside the church, there's a memorial to one of the church ministers who had a very famous nephew. Let's go in and have a look. This is Godfrey Washington's memorial. Godfrey Washington was the great uncle of George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. If we take a look at the Washington family coat of arms, we can see that it consists of stars, stripes, and an eagle. This coat of arms was used in 1776 for the basis of the American flag and crest. Next to Little St. Mary's Church is Peterhouse, the oldest of the 31 colleges of Cambridge University. Parts of the college are over 700 years old. The galleries and chapel at Peterhouse were built in 1632, while Matthew Wren, who was Sir Christopher Wren's uncle, was the college master. Peterhouse today has approximately 300 students, and it is the smallest undergraduate college of the university. Like many of the colleges at Cambridge, Peterhouse has had a number of exceptionally brilliant students, including William Brewster, who was the leader of the Pilgrim Fathers, who founded the first permanent European settlement in New England. Charles Babbage, who invented the first computer. The engineer, Sir Frank Whittle, who invented the jet engine. And the scientist, Henry Cavendish, who is best remembered for weighing the earth. He estimated the world to be 6,000 million tons. He must have had very big hands. The colleges and faculties of the university are spread out around the city. A walk along any of the city streets will take you past university buildings. This one is Corpus Christi College. It was founded in 1352. One former master of Corpus Christi was Matthew Parker. He played an important part in the establishment of the Church of England in the 16th century. However, tourists are more likely to remember him because people believe that he was the original Nosy Parker. He had a very inquisitive mind and a rather large proboscis. The city of Cambridge today has over 100,000 inhabitants. However, students and residents are encouraged not to use cars, making Cambridge a very pleasant city. In addition, most of the courtyards and gardens of the central colleges are open to the public, so visitors can easily escape the hustle and bustle of the city. Entering a college can be quite breathtaking. They are historically and architecturally spectacular, no less so than here at Emmanuel College. The college was founded during the reign of Elizabeth I in 1584 and it was the university's first Protestant college. In front of us is the college chapel and cloister gallery, designed by Sir Christopher Wren in 1666. It was Wren's second chapel in Cambridge. We will see another building by Sir Christopher Wren a little later on our tour. Like most of the 31 colleges of the University of Cambridge, Emmanuel is centred around a number of beautiful courts. Student accommodation, teaching rooms and offices are accessed via staircases, such as this one, directly from the courts. At Emmanuel, there is even a tunnel under one of the main city roads that link the college courts together. The university and its colleges are associated with many important events in English and world history. Emmanuel College itself played a very significant role in the establishment of the English colonies in North America. During the 17th century, Emmanuel College became the centre of new Puritan thought. Many of its graduates emigrated to New England to pursue their religion in their own way, greatly shaping the religious character of the United States that we know today. One of those students was John Harvard. He emigrated in 1637. Unfortunately, a year later, he died of consumption. He left money and his collection of books to a school in Newtown, Massachusetts. In his honour, the school was renamed Harvard University, and Newtown in Massachusetts was renamed Cambridge. How original! Visitors to Cambridge are sometimes surprised to find themselves with very wet feet. There are open water channels that run along one of the main city streets. To find the source of the water, we need to make our way to a monument on Trumpington Street. This is Hobson's Conduit, built in 1614 to bring fresh water to the people of Cambridge. Although no longer used for the modern-day water supply, runnels can still be seen along Trumpington Street. The conduit was named after a local man, Thomas Hobson. Thomas Hobson owned stables here in Cambridge and insisted that his customers hire the horse nearest the door, as it had rested the longest. This resulted in the expression Hobson's choice, because Hobson's customers had no choice at all. Hobson's Conduit brought fresh drinking water right into the centre of Cambridge. It terminated at a fountain here in the Market Square. There's been a market here since the Middle Ages. The market is open daily and has a variety of stalls, including organic produce, books, crafts, flowers, and so much more. It is on Market Square that we find Great St Mary's, which is Cambridge's principal parish church. It is also known as the University Church. Although an earlier church had existed on this site since at least 1205, the Great St Mary that we see today was built between 1478 and 1519. The 114-foot high tower wasn't completed for another 100 years. It was originally going to have a huge spire and be nearly twice as high. The tower is open to the public. There are 123 steps, and it is one of the best places for a panoramic view of Cambridge. The most impressive view from the tower is without doubt the view of King's College Chapel, which we will see later on our tour. Great St Mary's Tower also overlooks the old school buildings, which are the administrative centre of the university. These are some of the oldest buildings in Cambridge, parts of which date from the year 1350. The building's real age, however, is hidden by the smart white facade, which was added 250 years ago. Further away, there is the tower of Cambridge University Library, which was completed in 1934. When it was built, many people hated it and said that it looked like a giant telephone box. Well, the library's architect was Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, who did in fact also design the red British telephone boxes. Great St Mary's Tower is also the ideal place from which to watch the busy but mainly traffic-free city life. Cambridge has always been an important trading place for the surrounding areas, and today it is a very popular city for shopping. Nearly the entire city centre is pedestrianised. You simply can't get anywhere in central Cambridge without leaving your car and walking. The chimes of Great St Mary's Church sound like they have been copied from Big Ben at Westminster. In fact, it is Great St Mary's Church that is the real origin of this famous tune. The quarter chimes on the clock were composed in 1793 by a university professor called Dr. Joseph Jowett of Trinity Hall. They were subsequently copied for Big Ben at Westminster and are now called Westminster chimes. The University of Cambridge consists of a number of different colleges. However, there is one building opposite Great St Mary's that is the ceremonial centrepiece of the whole university. The elegant Senate House, built in 1730, was designed by James Gibb, and it is here where all students receive their examination results. It is also the setting of their graduation ceremony, where they are presented with their certificates by the Council of the Senate and the governing body of the university. The Senate House was the victim of a student prank back in 1958. Engineering students from the university hoisted a van onto the building's roof, as this newspaper clipping shows. Some buildings have become so popular with climbing students that they have had bars and spikes fitted as protection. Behind the Senate House, we find the location of the notorious Senate House Leap. Before we enter Senate House Passage, notice the gap between the turret and Gonville and Caius College and the far end of the Senate House roof. It is known as a Senate House Leap, traditionally jumped by the student club, the Night Climbers. Further along Senate House Passage is this splendid Gate of Honour, which belongs to Gonville and Caius College. Dr. Caius refounded the college in 1557 with 3 gates symbolising the student's academic life. The Gate of Humility, the Gate of Virtue, and finally this one, the Gate of Honour, where it is tradition that the students of Gonville and Caius pass through here and straight into the Senate House to receive their degrees. Senate House Passage leads us towards what was once a busy medieval street. This used to be one of the main streets in the city. That was until Henry VI built his college across it. King's College. King's College was founded by Henry VI, who in 1441 personally laid the first foundation stone. It resulted in the demolition of a quarter of the medieval town of Cambridge. The gatehouse, which was built relatively recently in 1828, leads through to the front court of the college. The fountain in the court shows Henry VI holding his will and intent, which represent his determination that the college should be built even after his death. Originally, all the student places at King's were reserved for boys from the exclusive Eton College. Thankfully, over the centuries, that has changed, and now nearly 3/4 of the British students that come to King's have been educated in state high schools. The chapel is one of the finest examples of late medieval architecture. Construction work finally finished on the chapel in 1544, about 100 years after King Henry VI had originally laid the foundation stone. The sheer size of King's College Chapel is quite breathtaking. Its magnificent fan vault ceiling is 80 feet high. It is one of the finest buildings of its kind anywhere in the world, and is the most famous building in Cambridge. Henry Tudor, who became King of England at the end of the War of the Roses, paid for the stonework of the chapel to be completed. He adorned the chapel with symbols of his new royal Tudor dynasty. Above the west door of the chapel, we can see the crowned Tudor roses. They combined the Lancaster rose and the York rose, which were the symbols of the two previous warring royal dynasties. The chapel has some of the best preserved medieval glass anywhere in the world. The windows are so precious that they were removed piece by piece and stored safely for the duration of the Second World War. From King's College, we make our way along the cobbles of Trinity Street to the university's largest and wealthiest college. Here we are outside the gates of Trinity College, founded in 1546 by King Henry VIII, which was one of the last acts he ever performed, because 6 weeks later he died. We can see a statue of Henry VIII. In his left hand he is holding a golden orb, representing the power of the king, and in his right hand a chair leg. A chair leg, I hear you ask? Well, many years ago, some of the students played a little prank and exchanged a sceptre, which he should be holding, for what we see today, a chair leg. Sir Isaac Newton was probably Trinity College's most famous student. This apple tree was planted in 1954 from a seed that came from Sir Isaac Newton's family home. People believe that Sir Isaac Newton watched an apple fall to the ground, which led him to the laws of gravity. Next door to Trinity is St John's College. There are around 800 students and 120 fellows at St John's, which makes it the second largest college of Cambridge University. It was founded in 1511 on the site of the 13th century hospital of St John the Evangelist. It was here that the great English poet William Wordsworth studied in 1787. St John's has a very elegant gatehouse, which was completed in 1516. The gatehouse is adorned with the coat of arms of the foundress of the college, Lady Margaret Beaufort. Lady Margaret Beaufort was married when she was 12 years old and a mother by the time she was 14. Her son later became King Henry VII. The statue is of St. John. He is holding a poisoned chalice. Legend says that St. John charmed the poison out of the chalice in the form of a serpent and then drank safely. The Victorian Gothic chapel at St. John's College was designed by the celebrated architect Sir George Gilbert Scott and completed in 1868. It was just one of more than 800 buildings that this famous architect was associated with. The chapel's outer wall is adorned with 16 beautiful lifelike statues of former members of the college. Of course, no visit to Cambridge would be complete without going on a punt along the River Cam. The river runs through the grounds of 8 of the 31 colleges of the university. Visitors can take one of the many punt tours along the river, or they can hire their own punt and try punting themselves. The first college we come to is Queen's College, which was founded in 1448 and is the oldest building on the river. Queen's College Bridge is at first sight not that remarkable. However, stories about the bridge are so popular with visitors that it is now known as the Mathematical Bridge. It is so called because when it was first built in 1749, its design was so perfect that it didn't need nuts or bolts to hold it together. The story goes that a group of students dismantled the bridge, and when they tried to reassemble it, they couldn't. So they had to use nuts and bolts. Unfortunately, it appears that this is just a story for tourists, and the original bridge was held together by pegs. This area of Cambridge is known as the Backs, as the river runs along the back of the colleges. It must be one of the most beautiful stretches of river in England. There are the spacious lawns and gardens of the different colleges and some of the best views of Cambridge. King's College Chapel, of course, is the most historically important building that can be seen from the river. There are 9 bridges that cross this mile-long stretch of the river that runs through the colleges. The oldest is Clare Bridge, which belongs to Clare College. The bridge was completed in 1640. In 1829, St John's College Boat Club challenged Oxford University to a race, which has since developed into the famous Cambridge-Oxford University boat race. Rowers from the university can be seen practicing just north of the city centre. This central section of the river that runs through the colleges is almost exclusively reserved for punting. It's difficult to imagine Cambridge without punts, but punting is a relatively recent activity. It only became popular in Edwardian times, about 100 years ago. The next building along the River Cam is the Wren Library at Trinity College. It was built in 1695 by the famous architect Sir Christopher Wren. Trinity College also hires punts for its students and for visitors. The names of Trinity's punts are quite interesting. Just as the word Trinity is associated with the number 3, so are the names of its punts. A leisurely punt along the River Cam past all the riverside colleges takes about 30 minutes, and the last college we are going to see today is my favourite, St John's. There are 2 bridges at St John's. The first bridge is the elegant Kitchen Bridge. It was completed in 1712 by Robert Grumbold. Sir Christopher Wren made suggestions on how the bridge should be built, so the bridge is also known as the Wren Bridge. One of the decorative stone carvings depicts Father Cam, the spirit of this beautiful river. The attractive red brick riverside buildings were built in the 17th century, and the beautiful new court at St John's was completed in 1831. It mainly accommodates students who are in their second year at the college. Because of the way it looks, it is known affectionately as the wedding cake. Connecting the old college and the new court is the beautiful Bridge of Sighs, resembling its famous Venetian cousin. The bridge was built in 1831. Along with King's College Chapel, it is probably the most photographed structure in Cambridge. It is said that the bars across the windows of the bridge were to stop drunken students from climbing in after the doors of the college were shut at night. Queen Victoria described it as the prettiest and most picturesque feature of the university. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Thank you for joining me on this guided tour of one of England's most interesting and beautiful cities. Goodbye.